Welcome to my channel.
I murdered Dekilin, the villain. Then I woke up as him. Rain lashed down, blurring the dark trees into indistinct shapes around us. My hand, pale and precise, lay flat on the wet stone, droplets splashing around it. I stood over Dekilin, the rain soaking through my clothes, my gaze fixed on the man I'd just brought down. I closed my eyes, a soft "phew" escaping my lips as the tension began to drain away. Team leader, her eyes glowing, looked up at me with an intensity that burned through the downpour. Her hands tightened around the hilt of her sword, ready for whatever came next. Dekilin coughed, blood trickling from his lips and staining the pristine white of his collar. His outstretched hand was slick with his own blood, stark against the dark fabric of his sleeve. He looked at me, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his bloodied lips, even as he struggled to breathe. Team leader watched him, her expression unreadable, a smear of blood now on her cheek. She dabbed at the blood on her face, her eyes still locked on the dying Dekilin. Then, with a finality, she turned her back on him, leaving him slumped against the railing in the pouring rain. Rain plastered my hair to my forehead, mixing with the blood that dripped from my mouth and chin. A notification flashed across my vision, confirming the engagement was nullified, just as I'd planned. Then the words I'd been waiting for. Stage clear. Congratulations, you have cleared the stage. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the bright screen, the harsh glow reflecting in my eyes. It was a relief to finally fix that bug that kept plaguing Dekilin's character, despite all the effort I'd put into him. My developer ID badge hung around my neck, showing my name, Kim Woojin, character model designer. A fellow developer stretched, letting out a loud yawn and declaring that overtime was finally over for the day. This game, the one I'd just spent hours in, was called The Villain Wants to Live. My studio, REW, was a console game development studio in South Korea, a country not exactly known for its console games. But REW had burst onto the scene, releasing hit after hit, becoming a name recognized worldwide. The stakes were high for us, to say the least. In other words, if this game didn't do well, we were utterly screwed. The core of our game hinged on its dynamic difficulty and a narrative that constantly shifted based on player choices. Even as a single-player experience, its advanced AI and memorable, named characters drew significant attention, along with a surplus of classes like Knight, Mage, Explorer, and even Royalty. We'd built in such a refreshing variety of roles that players could truly become whoever they wanted in this world. So, if the game succeeded, we'd be rolling in money. But the flip side was, if it flopped, our entire studio would go down with it. I leaned back, my eyes fixed on the screen, lost in thought. Dekilin von Grahen-Euklin, a name that had caused me endless headaches. He was an intermediate antagonist, but his potential to complicate things was off the charts. There were countless errors we had to fix just because of all the possible routes this one character could take. In the route I just completed, his death was at the hands of his fiancée, a stab wound to the chest. It made perfect sense, considering all the terrible things he'd schemed. I turned my head slightly, looking at the sticky notes plastered to the wall beside my monitor, a small frown on my face.
Team leader, my ex, leaned over my shoulder, her fingers gently tapping my head. "How's the testing going?" she asked.
She was smiling, but it felt brittle. We'd been together for 7 years. 7 years of happiness, of shared dreams. From laughing in the park to quiet kisses in the morning light, our lives were intertwined. Her hand in mine, a simple gesture that once meant everything. Late nights, coding side by side, her on her laptop, me on the bed scrolling on my phone. Even at the office, our desks were close, a comfortable familiarity between us. Then, one day, she simply walked away, and I was left clutching my head, unable to understand. 6 months, that's how long it had been since she left.
Heard things are going well with your new man, she said, her voice bright as I let out a tired sigh. Huh.
I mumbled that I thought things were going well, but hearing it from her about my company didn't sit right with me. I just kept typing.
Stop being so petty, she said, her tone sharper now, and keep it the bugs.
DeKillian stared out from the screen, his uniform neat, his expression coolly arrogant. Team leader was looking at me, but I was focused on the game, thinking about how I'd made DeKillian killable. That was the genius of our game and DeKillian's unique charm. The further the story progressed, the more powerful he became, and the player's choices directly influenced the difficulty.
She smiled, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes.
I explained that was exactly why I took him out as early as possible in my own playthroughs, making sure to hit him before he became too strong. I added that his final words were always the same, a furious curse. "You damned bitch."
She changed the subject, asking how I felt about the game overall, then added that while the game was fun, she didn't like the pressure of the studio's fate resting on it.
I just watched her, wondering what she was getting at.
She pointed out the window, asking if that was my little boyfriend over there.
Down in the parking lot, a man in a suit stood beside a sleek car, clearly waiting for someone. But then, the game bled into reality. He looked up, a slight, knowing smile on his face, as if he knew he was being watched. I turned my back to the window, the blue glow of the city lights reflecting faintly on my screen.
Yeah.
She offered a small wave as she walked away, heading for the elevator. I just watched her go, my hand resting on my chin. The moon outside was huge, almost impossibly bright, casting an ethereal glow over the city. The clock on the wall read almost 10 p.m. Another night melted away into the glow of my screen. That's when I saw it. The face on the screen, DeKillian's face, was looking back at me, his eyes wide. A cursor clicked, selecting an attribute, WizKid. From the very beginning, DeKillian was hailed as a magical genius, put on a pedestal for his intellect. But somewhere along the way, he developed the worst possible personality. Elitism, obsessive habits, competitiveness, even a forced sense of noble etiquette. Looking at the list of his traits, I found myself wondering if he could even be considered human. But then it dawned on me, a chilling realization. He was already surrounded by people who hated him. I sighed, leaning back in my chair, the glow of the monitors reflecting off my tired face. My hand hovered over the mouse, a thought nagging at me. Maybe I should try giving DeKillian an attribute like comprehension, something that sounds a bit like empathy, at least. Yeah, DeKillian, you could definitely become someone with more empathy than I have, even if it's just a game stat. And while I was at it, why not add wealthy, Midas touch, sharp eyesight, and Iron Man too? This was my chance to make him a little more likable, I guess. I ended up just piling on all the good ones, and now that I was done, I felt a bit ashamed of myself. I better revert DeKillian back to how he originally was before I caused some kind of problem. But then a notification chimed, and I startled, looking up at my screen. The message was from developer Rain, dated April 6, 2021. This was the story writer. She was still working and asked if I wanted to change anything about the model, saying she could do it right now. But my eyes weren't on the message. They were drawn to something outside the window, something I couldn't quite make sense of. Outside the window, the sky itself had ripped open, a maelstrom of dark clouds and lightning coiling into a massive, ominous hole. I could only stare, my mind trying to reconcile what my eyes were seeing with any kind of reality I understood. What in the world was that? The sky, it was like a wound. Then a searing white light erupted from the void, blinding and utterly overwhelming. The light twisted into something else, something dark and grotesque, a monstrous form reaching out from the impossible rift. What the heck was this? It felt like something was pulling me, something immense and terrifying. Then I was falling, surrounded by writhing shadows and a sickening, crimson light that felt like blood. I landed hard, sprawling on what felt like cold stone, a giant, grinning red skull looming above me in the darkness. A choked gasp escaped me, the impact stealing my breath. An ancient voice, deep and ancient, echoed through the void. "So, child, do not forget." The ancient voice shifted, growing harsher, and I saw the face of an old, weathered man. "Be wary of him, always. Dekilling is no tame man." The ancient voice then seemed to echo from a pile of bodies, a chilling reminder of the ruthlessness Dekilling was known for. He warned that though Dekilling might appear hesitant, he was capable of terrible things at any moment, images of violence flashing around me. He insisted that Dekilling was merely downplaying his own talents now, a dangerous calm before the storm. Dekilling's face solidified in my mind, grim and determined, as if ready to face the world the ancient voice described. Then a new voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the darkness, demanding I get up right now. I found myself lying on a luxurious bed, the morning sun streaming through a tall window onto patterned rugs, utterly disoriented. My eyes snapped open, a strange, piercing blue that I knew weren't mine. A young woman, face contorted in anger, stood over me, demanding to know how I could call myself a person, while a nervous maid tried to calm her. I let out a slow breath, my body feeling foreign, the soft sheets beneath me a stark contrast to the urgency in her voice. I pushed myself up, the young woman flinching back as if my movement alone was a threat. She continued her tirade, asking how long I planned to stay holed up because of some woman, accusing me of shaming the entire household. With a huff, she dropped a stack of papers on the floor near my bed, then turned and stomped away, the maid hurrying to follow. He let the silence carry the weight. Something shifted, quiet but final. The next move was already coming. It was the kind of stillness that comes right before everything. The look on his face said what words couldn't. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the moment broke, and everything after it changed. The air in the room pulled tight. He let the silence carry the weight. Something shifted, quiet but final. The title card, stark and glowing, was a constant reminder of my new reality. It had been a week since I arrived here, lying in Dekilling's opulent bed in Euclid Manor, the sunlight streaming in. I ran a hand through my hair, a subtle gesture that felt surprisingly natural in this new body. As the days blurred into a week, the sheer, undeniable reality of it all finally sunk in. I stared at my reflection, the face of Dekilling staring back at me, and felt a quiet dread. I, Kim Woojin, the game developer, had literally become Dekilling, the villain of the very game I'd spent so long developing. Dekilling von Grahen Euclid, a name that now felt like a curse, hung over me like a shattered reflection. He was the game's intermediate boss, the source of all problems, universally despised, and had brought pain to countless characters, as shown by the phantom skeletal figures swirling around me. Another critical issue was that I had no idea where I was in the game's timeline, only the total mana I possessed, and no clue how quickly it would deplete. My team and I had tested this game 1,000 times, and Dekyllian's character was designed to die. Out of all those playthroughs, his character had only ever survived once. Dekyllian's character, the one I'd designed to be a universally hated villain, was only ever meant to survive once. He was nothing but a villain, designed to die and serve as a middle boss. I sighed, looking at the formal documents scattered across the floor of this lavish room. The one who'd rudely woken me by throwing them was Uriel von Grahen-Euclin, Dekyllian's half-sister. She was also the one currently running House Euclin, in Dekyllian's place. Uriel was a sharp, calculating young woman, a true force to be reckoned with. And the woman Uriel had spoken of with such venom in her voice. That could only be Julie, Dekyllian's fiancée, with whom he clearly had some unresolved issues.
I'm leaving you these documents, so if you don't want to get fired from your fancy professor job, get up right now.
Her words hung in the air, a clear command. So the lecture was today, then. I picked up the papers, an unsettling feeling washing over me. I'd never given a lecture in my life, but I knew I needed to gather information, and this was my chance. Then, as I fully came to, a system message materialized before me, outlining a primary survival goal. I needed to become indispensable to this game world. It also noted that Uriel, my half-sister, posed a significant threat to Dekyllian's existence, a detail that resonated deeply with the game's original plot. I rose, my bare feet padding across the polished floor of the opulent room, the urgency of my situation pressing in on me. Another system window popped up, detailing an ability called Comprehension, which allowed me to understand anything by consuming mana. I made my way through the grand doors, ready to face the day and whatever challenges it brought. My hand instinctively reached for the bell to summon a servant. Soon, a luxurious bath was drawn, the steam rising in the lavish, ornate bathroom. Though the clothes and the entire ritual felt new to me, I moved through it all with an unsettling ease, as if I'd been Dekyllian my entire life. I dressed myself in a long, elegant coat, the fabric heavy and rich, a perfect fit for the aristocratic persona. It was as if Dekyllian's attributes, his intimidation and dignity, and even his aesthetic sense, had merged with my own being. My reflection stared back at me, a stern, unyielding gaze that was undeniably Dekyllian's. I walked with a new, measured stride, the formality that had once felt so rigid now feeling entirely natural. I couldn't even imagine saying anything crude. My steps echoed on the ornate university floor, heading toward my first lecture as Dekyllian. I told myself my main purpose was to gather information, but the sheer ease of this formal walk was unsettling. But his first lecture wasn't at all what anyone expected. The reflection of Dekyllian, the superior noble, stared back, and I almost believed it. The elegant shoes, the measured stride, it was all so perfectly him. But then a memory, a flicker of my real self, broke through the illusion, a sharp, angry thought that made me inwardly scoff. I saw my old ID card from REW, the game company, with Kim Woo-jin's face staring out from it. The memory of my ex-girlfriend, Julie, flashed in my mind, her voice ringing with an old, familiar insult. A pathetic, lazy bastard. And I knew, with a jolt, that she was talking about me, Kim Woo-jin, not Dekyllian. So I stepped out of the car, past the bowing attendant, reminding myself not to let my guard down, not to forget who I really was. I settled into the luxurious backseat of the car, the door clicking shut behind me. The opulence of the car only reminded me of the time I'd been so humiliated over a cheap car, and the anger still simmered. Beside me, Dekyllian's assistant sat, a quiet, diligent presence. He held a thick stack of papers, his gaze fixed on them, ready to feed me every word I needed to say. He practically leaped, holding out a document with both hands. "Professor, good afternoon, here it is." I leaned back, observing his eagerness. Was this guy really just an assistant, or more like a personal secretary? The car drove on, Dekillian's assistant still beaming with pride at his offering. I took the papers, expecting lecture material, but it wasn't that at all. It was a script meant for me to read aloud. Every single word I'd need to say for the lecture was written down, from start to finish, because Dekillian was so untalented and prideful he couldn't even write his own. Dekillian's assistant must have done all the work. A strange flicker crossed my vision, a brief glitch in the world around me. Dekillian's assistant, sitting in the passenger seat, seemed to notice something too, his head snapping up. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, a nervous sweat beading on his forehead, as if he'd never heard a kind word from Dekillian before. I covered my mouth with a gloved hand, a sudden wave of nausea washing over me. Just how terrible was Dekillian? I felt physically ill for having just complimented someone. Was this truly the real Dekillian, this abhorrent personality that made even basic human decency feel like poison? The car pulled up to the Imperial University building, gleaming under the bright sky. This grand complex, the Imperial University, was Dekillian's workplace, the place the letter had mentioned. I stepped out of the car, the Imperial University's massive architecture looming over me. My eyes scanned the elegant stone buildings, the area noted in Uriel's letter. Inside, students were already gathering in the lecture hall, buzzing with anticipation, ready to finally hear Dekillian speak. I walked with the measured, deliberate steps that felt so natural to Dekillian, his formal shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. Two students in the front row looked on, their faces a mix of excitement and awe. I continued my stately walk down the aisle, Dekillian's assistant's script clutched in my hand, toward the podium. Reaching the front, I paused, placed my hands on the podium, and announced, "Now I'll begin my lecture." Two young women in the audience leaned forward, their faces flushed with excitement, clearly captivated by Dekillian's presence. But then a hand clenched, knuckles white, a silent gasp of rage filling the air. The words echoed in my mind, "The enemy of my father." I looked out at the students and my gaze met hers. Julie, her eyes burning with a cold, clear hatred.
"Dekillian, you trash bastard," Julie mouthed, the words slicing through the air even without sound.
And then, suddenly, everything went dark. That was the chapter. Subscribe to see how the villain survives.